Hey, this is Chuck Sheldon-Brand. Today's topic is the second of the customizing topics. So yesterday we talked about customizing the labels. Data entered last, you can change all this stuff and you can change all this stuff. And it turns out that there are lots of labels to change. I mean, you can change these labels. This is the people side. Here's the client side. So there's more labels. So we talked about how to do that. And just a quick review, we did that in File Database Tools. We went to Settings. So File Database Tools, Settings. And in these labels boxes on each of these tabs, you can name everything in this database. And so we also talked about setting up standard memos and so on. So the beginnings of talking about customization had to do with labels on fields and then labeling these tabs up at the top here, which are indeed intended to handle text. The full text of the resume, your notes, whatever, you can set everything up customized. Now, to finish that customization process, today we're going to talk about this section at the bottom of the screen. Now, on my screen, it says job function title, key candidate info, products, education, years in workforce, and so on. You will see at the bottom of your screen, some comparable list. When we send the program, we send it with, when you open it up for the first time, you're going to see some columns down there. By the way, ever so briefly, when you're looking at the screen, on my screen now, my keyword list, these column sets are at the bottom. But here's a tiny little icon over here with two little arrows facing northeast and southeast. If you click that little tiny icon, it flips these two sections. Now my job order activities at the bottom, my keyword list is up above. If I click it again, now my keywords are, so you may not see your keywords at the bottom. If you're looking at my screen, they're at the bottom, but that's because this little icon here allows you to control that. And then, just to complete some sort of screen real estate stuff here, at the bottom of the right side of the screen, below the resume and my notes, there's two little arrows again, one facing up, one facing down. If I click the up-facing one, it pops up. It makes the memo shorter. Well, look what it did. It exposed wider. Here's all the columns in my keyword set. In fact, I can click it up one more time. Click. Now all of my job order activity columns are displayed. So typically, I think you leave those. I'm going to click them back down where they came from. So now the text on the right-hand side is deeper, and it's sort of handier to be able to see more of the text that's in the resume and your notes and so forth. But it does have the effect of obscuring these sections of the screen, and we're going to be focused primarily today on the keyword set. So let's take a look at this. Understand what it is. So I'm going to click the same as yesterday, File Database Tools, but today I'm going to go to the second one. So yesterday was Settings, today is Edit Valid Table, click. Now, here is a whole bunch of columns, and they are, I'm going to scroll down. Whoa, look how long these are. These go a long ways. And so my products column, remember, my little database, even though it's tiny, it only has 47 or 48 records, it's set up for engineering and manufacturing. So, and the point of today is that you can set this up for anything. So if you place accounting and finance people, biotech people, I don't know, IT people, clerical and light industrial, no matter what you place, you can set your key, I'll scroll back up to the top, you can set your keyword list up to reflect whatever your specialization happens to be. Now let's deal with a couple of topics here. If I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, I think I have 8 columns here. 3, 6, and 2 is 8. You have 8 columns. You can have 10, 12, 15, 25. You can keep going, but don't go past 10 or maybe a dozen. You don't need to create that many columns. If you get into this at all, you'll know that you can customize the dickens out of this for any any recruiting specialty, not just engineering, but anything. You don't need massive numbers of columns. You can accomplish an enormous amount I only have 8, but 10, 12. 10 or 12 is fine. But there's a point at which horizontal scrolling when you're in the database is such a pain in the neck that it's counterproductive. And if you keep your column numbers kind of to a more sensible number, 10 or a dozen at the most, and maybe less, my 8's pretty good here actually, then the program will just operate more efficiently. But now, what in the world is this column set to begin with? What is this stuff? Primarily, it's a search tool. Primarily, it allows you to, with your mouse only, click a bunch of stuff and find people based on search attributes. Now, let's bug out here for a second, so I'm going to close it. We're going to talk about searching. Here's the magnifying glass. And so this is actually next Monday's topic, search. You can find anything in combinations. You can do all kinds of searches, and you're not limited, even though I'm calling this section here at the bottom a search tool. These column titles become search tools. You can search the resume. You can search your notes. You can search address pieces, postal codes, states, cities. You can search dates. You can search anything. You're not limited at all to searching this, the keyword set. But it will indeed turn out that searching these keyword set is pretty slick. It's a time saver. It helps to ensure that you don't miss anybody. I mean, this is a neat thing, and it's just once in a while I find a situation where somebody doesn't really get much benefit from the keyword set. But out of thousands of customers, I think the number who don't much benefit from this would be a handful. I mean, very few. There are circumstances. If your database file is very tiny, like 500 or 1,000, that's tiny. Or if you just don't have words that you're looking for in a resume and automatically extract stuff, you know, there could be, but for 99+% of people, this keyword deal is pretty slick. Now, let's go back there. File database tools and edit valid table. Now, what is this stuff? Well, it's a table, and we're in the valid table editor. We're in the table editor, so this is the entire table. Tables are made up of columns, and so I have a column called job function title. I have a column called products, education, a kind of catch-all column called key candidate information, a money column, a relocation column. This is very much a USA thing. You can have different. Here's the thing. Yes, you can customize these. You can get rid of columns. You can add columns, no matter where you are. So if you're not in the U.S., you can set up a relocation column if that's a valuable thing for you that reflects your own local geographic area. And a year's experience, this is a clever thing. This reasons for leaving is kind of more sales targeted. I mean, more targeted towards sales candidates, because with sales candidates, that's kind of a key question. Why are you leaving the sales job that you currently have? You know, what's going on? I leave this column, even though it's narrowly focused in terms of utility, I leave it in because it illustrates something. And that is, these keyword sets are not just for job titles and skills. To a great extent, yes, they're about job titles and skills. But it's surprising how much you can create a drop-down list even to deal with more open-ended ideas like, why are you looking for a job? That's kind of an open-ended question. Well, in fact, there's kind of a handful of answers to that question. And you might want to find it useful to have an ability to go click, click, rather than start typing blah, blah, blah. Somebody's not happy because the company is downsizing or I got fired or something. You can create a drop-down list to cover some fairly broad concepts. So I leave that in just to illustrate that idea. But let's go back to kind of the primary issue, job function title. If I'm in the table editor, if I double-click in a column, I just double-clicked over here, and it puts it into a column editor. So I'm drilling down from the table editor into a column editor. And if I then scroll down to, oops, I scrolled down way too far. Didn't mean to do that. Let's just slide back up. And we'll go to the QA method. This is what I always use. I double-clicked an item, and now I'm drilled all the way down to the bottom of the pile. I'm in an item editor. So here's an item editor and the column editor and the table editor. Here's why this is here's one reason why. There are others, but here's a major reason why this is a handy search tool. We're stuck with the fact that the candidate's word choice is completely up to the candidate, him or her, right? Somebody sits down at the kitchen table with a laptop and composes a resume. Who knows when they compose that resume if they thought abbreviations like QA were a good idea or a bad idea? It can be either one. You could say abbreviations, no, this is a formal document. I need to have everything spelled out. Or you could say, I need to keep this resume short. If this thing gets to be 3 pages, nobody's ever going to read it. So a candidate's going through, some judgments as to how to compose that resume. Here's the thing. Searching by job title is a pretty common thing. Not universal, but pretty common. Well, if you don't use this keyword set, then it falls upon you to remember every time you do a search, which turns out to be a lot of time, right? Because a database product for recruiting is largely for the purpose of searching. So you're trying to find people based on titles or skills. Well, if that title or skill can be set in more than one way, you'd have to remember every time you searched that these all mean the same thing. And you would need to type all this stuff in as or conditions. It's not hard to do, although typing, that's a lot of letters, by the way. That's a lot of words and stuff. And making a typo, that's kind of common. And then you'd find all the people who can't spell. And you don't want to do that and I've had that happen where people, it does happen. People type in, when you're free-form typing to do a search, if you misspell a word, you're going to only find resumes in which words are misspelled. So anyway, enough said. You want to set up your synonym list, I think, for titles, because here, once you've got this set up where you said QA manager, well, these all mean exactly the same thing. Then, and we'll do this ever so quickly, if I bug out of here, I'll do this 1,000 times, so you may have heard all this before, but if I click on my icon to automatically create a record, choose file on disk, choose, I got to go to my F drive and to, I think, RESUMate, and to sample resumes. Yeah. So I'm going to go, I'm just browsing my hard drive to find the name of this guy. And I'm going to say OK, and I'm going to say save, and I'm going to say yes, and I'm going to say save. Here, I just made a record. Here's my QA manager. What's the resume say? The resume says a synonym, quality assurance manager. So because my keyword list contained an item called QA manager, and we found a synonym, we marked that record correctly. So what this is all about is automatic coding. Coding is kind of an old concept, but in its current iteration, it's pretty slick anyway. I mean, you don't need to code you don't need to assign numbers or get kind of fancy. Software today is certainly capable of reading a text stream and finding preset phrases and words in that text stream and then pulling them out automatically. So one of the reasons why you want to set your keyword list up with synonyms is to save yourself the grief of having to remember every time you do a search, how else might the candidate have said this now? Let's look at something else. The job title column has a little graphic up here, a little list type graphic. But if I get to a money column, current compensation, there's no little graphic here. Reload, no little graphic there, none here, none here. Just things like job title, products, and why. Let's double click in our column again. Well, here's a little checkbox. It says include this column when auto-classifying records. If that box is checked, you're going to see this little graphic in the top of the column. But that says everything in this column, so all of these titles and all of the synonyms connected to all these titles, that's what we're going to, that's what auto-classifying means. I'm going to see if I can find a match in the incoming resume that matches up to either an item or a synonym. And if so, I'm going to mark that record as having that. That's a good thing. That's a time saver. And as I said a bit ago, it's more than a time saver, because if you forgot a synonym, if you forgot a variation, just a language variation of a title or a skill, you could miss somebody. And I mean, on a given Tuesday morning, that might be easy to do. The forgetting would be easy. Remembering all the variations might not be so easy. So when you're focused on customizing, think about the synonyms, set them up as pre-existing things, and you're good to go. So that's one of the main concepts I want to communicate today, is that setting up your word, setting up, first of all, choosing the columns. We ship the program, I think, with 5 columns, and I think we include this key candidate info column. We'll talk about that in a second. And we include, I think, job titles, but you're going to want to further customize this. Now, let's look at something. If I click the word column, so this is a short little menu list, table, column, help. Let's click column. Add, edit, delete, which you can do, or import. What's this? Click. Well, here's what this is. Here's a whole bunch of pre-existing, preloaded columns. And if I find something that seems to match or come close to what I knew, let's do healthcare, double click. Well, it says import columns. I chose an industry title, and here are all of there's a whole slew of, column titles. Let's check a bunch of them off here and say OK. When I say OK, this space over here is going to pick up all those columns. Boop, and there they all are. So, wow. I now have a very running head start. If I do healthcare, well, my goodness, I got a lot of preset stuff that makes sense. And so here's care functions and certifications, it looks like it says. And so, indeed, here's a bunch of things I hope would make sense to you. Let's see if we have, let's double click an item. Yeah, here's LVN. Yeah, here's a good synonym, L.V.N, and then licensed vocational nurse is the spelled out version. So there's a lot of stuff in here that's preloaded, and you can take advantage of that just by clicking column and then import, and you'll see all these industry kind of categorizations. Now, I'm going to close this without saving because I don't want to add this to my little show and tell set here. Do you want to save changes? No. So I'm back in my record. I'm going to go right back there. So file database tools, edit valid table. And so here's my table set, and I can add to this by clicking column import. Now, let's talk about this column for a second. I'm going to double click it to put it into a column editor. I kind of like this column as a grab bag, and I created this column a long time ago based on feedback from a lot of people. RESUMAte's almost entirely based on feedback from real people who do this for a living and who have good ideas, and we steal all the good ideas. So the idea of this is like a grab bag, a kind of catch-all ranking, source, if I scroll down, citizenship, a general money thing, travel percent, languages, and problems. I put a whole bunch of stuff in here. Well, and notice this column, by the way, does not have the checkbox because this data is most certainly not in the resume. If we're creating a record based on a resume, well, that stuff isn't there. Making an ABC ranking decision is a judgment call. And the point is, this column, let's bail out here for a second and go back to our records. And we'll go back to the guy, which is, if I talk to Ken, and I've got the benefit of I would make my notes of the phone call over here, but I could come down here, double click in this column, and I could say, I'll click the word ranking too, and I'll say I got him from LinkedIn or whatever I did here, and he's a USA guy, not a Canadian. Get rid of that. You could just select things and say, okay, now all those attributes are connected to his record. So when I do searching, I could say, find me people who have a certain skill set, but who I've judged in my phone conversation to be A-level people. In other words, you can add data. You're not limited to just having the software automatically extract stuff from the resume stream. No, you can just click stuff in and then click save, and now those are search attributes in that person's record. So my grab bag which you're free to change. This is an editor; you can do anything. So if I go back here, if I double click in a column, well, I could do the following. I'd say, well, let's get rid of Workopolis. I don't like that anymore. I don't use that's a Canadian thing or something. I don't use it. If I click Item and Delete, click one. I'm going to say cancel because I don't want. But since this is an editor, you can add, edit, delete, alphabetize. You can do anything. Well, here, let's do that. I'm going to take this source thing. I'm going to click Monster. I'm going to come down and click Referral with a shift click. So now those sources are all blue highlighted. Now this A to Z is no longer grayed out, but normal. Click. So now I just alphabetize that little section of my table. You kind of want to do this. I mean, by this I mean you want to spend some time setting up your table so that it is clutter-free. You don't want to have a lot of stuff in here that you never use. In fact, I would say for sure, so we'll save this. That was a good change to make. You don't want to have stuff in here. So if this reason for this was, I don't care about this, click, column, delete. Are you sure? I'll say no, but you could say yes and get rid of that column. And if you're in a column and you want to get rid of some stuff, you can just, here we'll go in this column, and we could say, well, I'll place anybody in that money range. So I could do a click, shift, click. And I could say item delete and get rid of all of those things. You can cut and paste. You can take stuff from a column, move it elsewhere in the column. You can you can cut and paste from column to column. So you can do, all kinds of stuff with this. This is intended to be something which you have control over. We'll help you with this, but it's easy stuff to do. And here's a very important kind of saving grace issue here, and that is, let's say that you've had the program for a while, and then you say, oh my gosh, I should have put in 10 more job titles or 10 more skills, or hey, there's a brand new skill that's just coming on stream, starting to show up in resumes, and I want to. If you add things to the table, when you try to save, if you make changes and you click the save button, it will ask you, you've added one item, you've added 2 items, you've added 100 items, you've added synonyms, you've added whatever. It'll say, would you like to auto-classify now? Say yes to that. And you actually get that question asked for the people file, the client file, and the job order file. Normally you're doing it for people, so you'd say yes on the people side. It will automatically backfill against your existing records the new stuff that you've added. If the records in your database have the new items or synonyms that you've added to your table, they will all automatically be updated to show your newest changes. So you don't have to make this thing perfect on day one. You can make this thing good and then make it better over time. And that's really all you can ever do there. It's never going to be perfect because time marches on, and either your business focus changes or new skills come into play. You can always change this. And as you make changes to it, if you add things, you can automatically add them to anything you've added to the table can be automatically selected so it matches any resumes in your existing file. If you delete things from this table, obviously they'll be deleted from records as well. In other words, if you got rid of, for no good reason, BS in aerospace engineering, if you got rid of that item, so we put that in the column editor and click and say item and say delete. If I got rid of that, and any records in my database had that item selected, it'll go away. I mean, the table stays in sync with the records in your database. So the time it takes to do this and the fact that it's forgiving, don't try to make it perfect. Don't take forever creating this table, because you can come back to it even after you've started putting in records and clean it up, add more things, get rid of things, make it work as a search tool. And of course, anything you do in this table editor is going to apply to every record in your, to every user in the database. So if you're part of a team and other people use the database, well, as you add more things to the table editor, you're adding those things to everybody's screen, not just yours, but to any user of the database. Couple of comments here. We're getting close to the time slot here. Quick comment about this years in workforce. I think I'm going to double click and put it in the comment. I think this is a smart thing, because a smart way to say years experience, because time passes quickly. And if you had, and I've seen this before, people set it up saying entry level in their table, they have a column that says years experience. Entry level 1 to 3 years, 4 to 5 years, 5 to 7, 8 to 10, 10 plus. Well, that's nice. On the day that you click it, it's true. But a year later, it's false. And 2 years later, it's getting seriously out of date, and 3 years and so forth. And you'd have to keep on changing. And who the heck could ever do that? Because your database is numbered in pretty big numbers, typically hundreds, if not thousands. But if you do it this way, years in workforce, 2016, that would be somebody who now in 2017 has maybe 1 year. I mean, and if somebody got into the workforce in 2007, they've now got 10 years, and next year they'll have 11. This is an evergreen way of saying how much experience does it bring. I think we ship this column with the product as well. It's just I think it's a smart way to deal with the question of years experience. And something else I want to say. I said earlier that by using the keyword set as your search tool, you're increasing the chances of having, not overlooking anybody, of finding all pod, because the synonyms are an important part. You don't have to remember all that stuff. You can search for job titles and skills. Well, that's true. That it helps you to find all the possible hits in your database that possibly you should be looking at. But something else is true. If you use the keyword set, your searches will be essentially instantaneous. When you do a search, we'll do this next Monday. When you do a search using your keyword set, boop, the answer is on your screen in 2 seconds. And if you freeform search, it might take a minute or two if you search the full text of the resume, especially if it's an or condition search. And if you have more than 10,000 records, 20,000 in your database, it takes a little time. Nobody has patience, so nobody wants to wait a minute for the answer or 2 minutes. They want the answer now. Well, if you do searches of this stuff, the answer comes back in a matter of seconds. So it's a good source as a search tool. Yeah, let me quickly, I'm looking at some notes here. Yeah, I thought I have, and then I'll close out here. You might be smart, even if one of our column sets is pretty good and has the stuff that you like, and it's going to work perfectly, it'll do one. But I often think this is the case, that people have a kind of sweet spot of titles or skills that really work for them. It's because you're good at that, because you know an area well. Well, take the very small amount of time, click the button that says add. Now I can add my own column, give it a title, and start putting items in, and either check or uncheck this box. Think about this for a second. If you leave that box checked, then anything you put in your sweet spot column is going to be automatically searched for existing records. And that could be a good thing. But what if you wanted to leave that unchecked as an alternative, so that when a record joins the database, you go to that column and you select it yourself. You say, well, after you've had a phone call, click, click, click. Because you know in short order what that person really brings to the table. And so even though I always use IT as an example, people can have a slew of development tools that they've had experience with, but you know when you talk to them that 90% of those are kind of irrelevant, that only a handful really reflect, the person's deep skills. And so you want to put their deep skill set and not just trivial things where they've had a weekend seminar or something. So having a column set of your own that really gets to the heart of the matter can be a good thing, and you could make it either automatically coded or let it be something that you click in. And what I tell people typically is, and I'm getting a bit over time here, but not too much yet, if you were to take resumes that then whether just do it on your screen in Word or do it on paper if you've got paper copies. But if you take a dozen resumes and you highlight the skills that most are important, that are most important to you, after a dozen, you're going to start to highlight the same stuff, because if resumes you have are focused, at all, the handful of things that I'm going to guess is 25. I'll just pick a number, but there'd be a smaller number of important things to you. Well, that's a perfect column to make in your keyword set. And then if we have a longer column like we have here for engineering or products, these are fine. Use these if that's relevant to what you do. But your column that is very uniquely yours, that came from highlighting some resumes, and then once you start to see repetition after a dozen or so, well, click the button add, and then give yourself those dozen or so titles. It's just a good thing to do. So the table is a powerful thing. Hasn't gone away. We started this a long time ago, way back when this was a DOS program, and the concept of a table so that you can click things is a pretty sturdy concept. I think any ATS has something like that. So enough said, so let's look for questions here. Okay, do the fields have autofill for columns? Not sure I understand the question, so let's try that for a second. And how do you set the, I'm going to go back to the table. So, file database tools, edit valid table. Do the fields have autofill for columns? No, I see what the question is. No, if the autofill for columns, I'm going to bail out of here now. The autofill is going to come from the resume, from the memo section. This part of the screen over here can be your notes. There's a little icon up here. That's this one that says auto classify based on memo contents. So if I click this icon, it's going to read that resume and match it up against the table. But these fields, there's no auto classify for the field. So these do not automatically fill this in, just the memo section fills that in. How do you set the primary synonym? Well, there is no, in a sense, what you set is the item. Let's go back to file database tools, edit valid table. What you set, if you click add, and we have a column title, we'll just call this anything to get me in here. I'll call it test, new item. What I'm going to create here is my choice of words, whatever I would spontaneously think that's what I'm looking for, QA manager or some darn thing. That's the item. Synonyms, when you click this add button, you can, so there is no primary, secondary. Make the item however you instinctively think about something, and then click the add button and start putting in synonyms. And by the way, synonyms don't necessarily have to be just language variations. In other words, QA manager and quality assurance manager. Sometimes one set of words, maybe in the resume, is completely, grammatically different. I mean, the example I used to use is controller and accounting manager. Those can be the exact same title, mean the same person, whoever prepares financial statements. So those aren't language variations, they're just different word choices. Sometimes one word or phrase triggers, another concept altogether. Those happen to be just variations, but not language type abbreviations for things. But anyway, set your item up and then add the synonyms with this add button. Can you copy and paste the list of items? No, you can't, unfortunately. You have to actually key them into this. There's so much going on here. Sometimes I wish we had let you put an Excel file in, but you can't. You have to actually come in here, open up a column, and then you can come down here to any place in the column, click this little sheet of paper. You can add a new item which will appear right above wherever you're highlighting, but you got to key your words into the table itself. you could copy something to the clipboard, and then when you got into the item thing, you could click here and click paste, Control V, and that would put it in. So you can use cut and paste or copy and paste to move things from a doc into here, but you can't like take an Excel file and move the whole file in. I think that's it. If you have other questions, please shoot me an email. But I think we're over time now anyway. So yeah, if you have questions, shoot me an email or give me a call. I'll answer them in more detail. But thanks for attending. Tomorrow is so we're past. This is the end of the customization stuff. Tomorrow we'll be talking about adding records with your mouse. It's called building your file with mouse clicks only. So that's what you want to do. The admin effort to add records to the database is so tiny that you can do it faster yourself than you could hand it off to somebody else. So that's tomorrow's topic. So thanks for attending, and I'll be sending out the invitation for tomorrow here shortly. Thank you.